A humble beginning. The village of Adoba sat nestled between sprawling green fields and a river that glittered under the sun. It was a place where the air was thick with the scent of freshly tilled soil and the songs of birds echoed through the hills. Among the villagers lived Okaro, a man known for his tireless work and unwavering love for his family. Okaro was a farmer, though not one who owned land of his own. Each day, from dawn until dusk, he toiled on the fields of wealthier men. His hands were calloused, his back bent from years of labor, yet his spirit remained unbroken. At home, Okaro's wife, Amara, worked just as hard. Each morning, she packed a woven basket with fresh vegetables and fruits and made her way to the bustling market. Together, they scraped by, providing for their family with honesty and determination. Their home was small, a thatched roof and mud walls, but it radiated warmth. Okaro's sons, Emeka and Kobe, were lively boys who spent their days helping with small chores and chasing each other around the village. His daughter, Nora, however, was the jewel of the family. With her bright eyes and a kind heart, she brought joy to everyone she met. She often sang while helping her mother or braided her brother's hair under the shade of the old mango tree. In the evenings, the family would gather around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. Despite their struggles, they had a bond that no wealth could replace. Okaro often told his children, "We may not have much, but as long as we have each other, we are the richest people in Adoba." Yet, not everyone in the village shared Okaro's outlook. His childhood friend, Tond, had grown into a man who valued wealth above all else. Tond owned vast lands and cattle and took every opportunity to remind others of his success. While he occasionally greeted Okaro with the facade of friendship, his words were often laced with mockery. "Okaro, my old friend," Tond would say, patting him on the back, "still working other men's fields, I see. When will you own something of your own? Or is that dream as distant as the stars?" Okaro would smile politely, hiding the sting of Tond's words. "Hard work and patience are my tools, Tond. That is enough for me." One afternoon, as Okaro finished his work, he walked past the village square where a group of men, including Tond, had gathered. They were laughing and talking loudly, their voices carrying in the breeze. Okaro paused, curious, and moved closer, staying hidden behind a tree. He overheard Tond's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Okaro. That man is destined to toil forever. He could never know how to escape his wretched life unless he dared to do what no man should." The words sent a chill down Okaro's spine. He stepped back, his heart pounding. What could Tond mean? What was this thing no man should dare to do? As he walked home that evening, the words echoed in his mind. Though he tried to focus on the laughter of his children and the warmth of Amora's smile, a seed of doubt had been planted in his heart. Could there truly be a way to escape the poverty that had bound his family for generations? And if so, what terrible price might it demand? The sun set over Adoba, casting long shadows across the village. Okaro sat silently by the fire, staring into the flames, his mind clouded with questions he dared not ask aloud. The night carried a strange tension, and Okaro couldn't shake the feeling that Tond's words had unlocked a door to a path he wasn't sure he wanted to take, the mysterious stranger. The moon hung low over the village of Adoba, its pale light casting silver beams across the quiet fields. Okaro couldn't sleep. Tond's words from earlier that day echoed in his mind like a drumbeat, refusing to fade. He could never know how to escape his wretched life unless he dared to do what no man should. Unable to shake his unease, Okaro decided to take a walk. The air was cool, and the rhythmic chirping of crickets filled the night. He wandered through the dirt paths that wove between the fields, his thoughts heavy and conflicted. What could Tond have meant? Was there truly a way to change his fate? As he passed the edge of the forest, the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. Okaro stopped in his tracks, his heart quickening. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged, a hunched, old man dressed in tattered robes. His skin was weathered like ancient bark, and his eyes seemed to glow faintly, reflecting the moonlight. "Good evening, traveler," the old man greeted in a raspy voice. "Why do you wander alone under the stars when most men are safe in their homes?" Okaro hesitated but replied, "I couldn't sleep. My thoughts are restless." The old man chuckled, a low, almost chilling sound. "Restless thoughts often mean the gods are whispering to you." He stepped closer, his bony hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me, young man, what weighs so heavily on your heart?" Okaro, wary but curious, explained his struggles, his hard work, his love for his family, and the constant weight of poverty. He spoke of how he had overheard Ton's cryptic words and how they had planted seeds of doubt in his mind. The old man nodded as though he had heard these words 1,000 times before. "Oh, the burden of a kind heart," he said. "You toil endlessly for your family, yet the world rewards you with nothing but hardship. Tell me, Okaro, do you truly believe this is the life the gods intended for you?" Okaro stiffened. "How do you know my name?" The old man smiled, his teeth yellowed and sharp. "I know many things. I know that you dream of a better life for your children. I know that you ache to be free from the chains of poverty. And I know that the gods watch those who are willing to sacrifice for greatness." Okaro felt a chill creep up his spine. Sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice? The old man's eyes seemed to gleam. "Not all sacrifices are made of blood, young man. Some demand courage. Others require faith. The question is, how much are you willing to give to change your fate?" The stranger's words hung in the air like a spell. Okaro's heart raced. A part of him wanted to walk away, to dismiss the old man's riddles as nonsense. But another part of him, buried deep, was tempted. "I don't understand what you mean," Okaro said, taking a cautious step back. The old man reached into his robe and pulled out a small, golden trinket. It gleamed faintly in the moonlight, shaped like an intricate knot. He held it out to Okaro. "Take this," the old man said. "It is not an answer, but a key. When the time comes, you will know what to do." Okaro hesitated but reached out and took the trinket. The moment it touched his palm, the old man began to fade, his form dissolving into the night like smoke carried by the wind. "Wait!" Okaro called, but it was too late. The stranger was gone, and the forest was silent once more. The next morning, Okaro stared at the golden trinket in his hand, its intricate design almost hypnotic. He couldn't decide whether it was a gift or a curse. Against his better judgment, he decided to show it to Ton. Perhaps his friend would have answers. When Okaro arrived at Ton's home, the wealthy man was lounging under the shade of a large tree, sipping from a clay mug. He greeted Okaro with his usual smugness. "Oh, my dear friend," Ton said. "Come to admire the fruit of my labor again." Okaro ignored the taunt and held out the trinket. "Ton, have you ever seen something like this before?" The moment Ton's eyes fell on the golden knot, his face turned ashen. He sat up straight, the mockery vanishing from his expression. Where did you get that?" "I met an old traveler last night," Okaro explained. "He gave it to me and said it was a key." "Do you know what it means?" Ton's hands trembled as he pushed the trinket away. "Okaro, you've been chosen," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The gods have marked you." "Marked me for what?" Okaro demanded, but Ton only shook his head. "You don't want to know," Ton said, his voice filled with fear. "Return it, Okaro. Bury it. Forget you ever saw it." But as Okaro left, clutching the trinket tighter, he couldn't shake the feeling that the old man's words were true. This was no ordinary gift, it was the beginning of a path that could either save his family or destroy them. A promise of wealth. The following night, as the village slept under the silver gaze of the moon, Okaro was awoken by a soft knock on his door. Startled, he lit a small oil lamp and cautiously stepped outside. The night was eerily quiet, and a cold breeze whispered through the air. Standing on the edge of his yard was the familiar figure of the old man, Moloko. "Okaro," Moloko called, his voice cutting through the silence. "The time has come for you to learn the truth." Okaro felt a chill crawl up his spine but knew he couldn't ignore the summons. With a quick glance back at his home, where his family slept peacefully, he followed Moloko into the forest. Deep within the woods, under the shadow of ancient trees, Moloko stopped in a clearing. The ground was marked with strange symbols drawn in white ash, and a faint glow seemed to radiate from the air itself. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, its surface worn and cracked with age. Moloko turned to face Okaro, his glowing eyes piercing the darkness. "You are here because the gods have seen your suffering. They have chosen you, Okaro, to carry a great blessing, if you are willing to pay the price." Okaro clenched his fist. "What price? What do you mean by sacrifice?" Moloko gestured toward the altar. "The gods do not give their gifts freely. To receive their favor, you must offer something of equal value. A priceless offering. Something that holds the greatest meaning to you." Okaro felt his breath catch. "You're asking me to give up my family?" Moloko's expression didn't change. "Not necessarily your family. The gods ask for what is dearest to you. It is not always blood. Sometimes it is trust. Sometimes it is faith. Only you can decide if the price is worth paying." "I can't do it," Okaro said, shaking his head. "I won't." Moloko tilted his head. "Your hesitation is understandable. But let me show you what is possible." He reached into his robe and pulled out a single gold coin, its surface gleaming brighter than the moonlight. He handed it to Okaro. "This is just a taste," Moloko said, his voice smooth and persuasive. "Imagine your family never knowing hunger again. Imagine a life where your children are not ridiculed, where your wife does not break her back at the market. A life where your name commands respect." Okaro stared at the coin, its weight heavy in his palm. His mind raced with images of a better life, Nyora smiling in a fine dress, Emeka and Kobe growing strong and educated, Amora resting in a home filled with warmth and abundance. The temptation was overwhelming. But deep down, he felt a pang of unease. "And what if I refuse? What happens then?" Moloko's expression darkened. "Refusal does not free you from the God's gaze. You have been marked, Okaro. If you do not embrace their blessing, they may take what they desire anyway. But the choice is yours, for now." Okaro stepped back, his heart pounding. "I need time to think." Moloko nodded. "You have until the next full moon. Until then, consider this coin a gift. Take it home, and let it remind you of what could be." Before Okaro could respond, Moloko stepped into the shadows and disappeared, leaving only the faint scent of burning herbs behind. The clearing fell silent, the strange symbols on the ground fading as if they had never been there. When Okaro returned home, his thoughts were a storm of conflict. He couldn't bring himself to tell Amora what had happened, so he slipped the coin into his pocket and climbed into bed, hoping sleep would offer him clarity. The next morning, he awoke to the sound of Nyora's laughter outside. For a brief moment, the weight on his heart lifted. But as he stepped out to join his family, he froze. Sitting on his doorstep was a chest, large, ornate, and gleaming with gold. Okaro's heart raced as he cautiously approached and opened it. Inside was a fortune far beyond anything he could have imagined: gold coins, jewels, and precious ornaments that shimmered like sunlight trapped in metal. His wife and children gathered around, their faces alight with wonder. "Okaro," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "What is this? Where did it come from?" Okaro swallowed hard, unsure of how to answer. "It's a blessing," he said finally, forcing a smile. "The gods have blessed us." His family's joy was infectious, but deep down, Okaro couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Was this truly a gift from the gods, or was it the bait in a dangerous trap? As he watched his children marvel at the treasure, he felt the weight of his choice pressing harder on his soul. That night, as the village buzzed with rumors of Okaro's newfound wealth, he sat alone by the fire, staring at the golden coin Moloko had given him. He couldn't help but wonder, what would the gods demand in return? And could he pay the price without losing everything he held dear, the dark decision? The days that followed were a whirlwind of change for Okaro and his family. The once humble household, with its modest thatched roof and sparse furnishings, was transformed into a beacon of prosperity. Fine clothes replaced worn garments, the kitchen overflowed with food, and their simple home now boasted beautiful carvings and colorful decorations. In the village, whispers filled the air. "Have you seen Okaro's house? How could a farmer suddenly afford such riches? Do you think he found buried treasure?" At first, Okaro basked in the admiration. The same people who once dismissed him now greeted him with respect. Even Tond, who had once mocked Okaro's poverty, visited frequently, speaking in overly friendly tones. "Okaro, my old friend," Tond said one afternoon as he admired the gold ornaments in Okaro's home. "You've been blessed indeed. But tell me, where does such fortune come from?" Okaro forced a smile. "Hard work and the gods' favor, Tond. That's all." Tond raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but he let the matter drop for the moment. Yet the questions from others in the village persisted, their curiosity mixed with suspicion. At home, the family seemed happier than ever. Amora laughed more, relieved that she no longer had to work tirelessly at the market. Emika and Kobe played with new wooden toys, their joy infectious. And Nyora, ever perceptive, noticed her father's quiet struggle. One evening, as the family sat around a bountiful dinner, Nyora touched her father's arm. "Baba," she said softly, her bright eyes searching his face. "Why do you seem so sad? Aren't you happy now that we have everything we've ever wanted?" Okaro looked at her, his heart aching. Nyora's innocence and kindness were what he loved most about her, yet they were also what made the old man's demand so unbearable. He forced a smile, patting her hand. "I am happy, Nyora. You've all brought me so much joy. Don't worry about me." But Nyora didn't look convinced. She gave her father a small smile, as if to say she understood more than he thought, before returning to her meal. That night, after his family had gone to bed, Okaro sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The weight of his secret was crushing him. He clutched the golden coin Moloko had given him, its cold surface a reminder of the deal he had made. As if summoned by his thoughts, the air in the room grew cold. The fire flickered, and then, as before, Moloko appeared, stepping out of the shadows as though he had always been there. "Okaro," Moloko said, his voice low and commanding. "The time has come. The gods have been patient, but their patience is not endless." Okaro stood, his fist clenched. "What do you want from me?" Moloko's glowing eyes narrowed. "You know what they demand. A priceless offering. Something irreplaceable. You have 7 days, Okaro. Fail to deliver, and the gods will take what they are owed by force. And trust me, their wrath is far less merciful than their blessing." "I can't," Okaro said, his voice breaking. "I can't give them what they want." "You can," Moloko said sharply. "And you must. Do you think this wealth came without cost? You accepted their gift, and now you must honor your end of the bargain." Okaro shook his head, his mind racing. There must be another way. Take back the gold, the jewels, everything. I don't want it anymore. Moloko laughed, a cold, hollow sound. It doesn't work that way, Okaro. The gods do not bargain. They take what they are owed. You have 7 days. Choose wisely. And just as suddenly as he had appeared, Moloko vanished, leaving only the smell of ash and the heavy weight of his words. For the next few days, Okaro was consumed by fear and guilt. He barely ate, and his sleep was plagued by nightmares of losing everything he loved. His wife noticed his distant behavior. Okaro, Amora said one morning, her voice gentle but firm. Something is troubling you. Please, tell me what it is. I'm fine, Okaro replied quickly, avoiding her gaze. I'm just tired. But Amora wasn't convinced. She watched her husband closely, her concern growing with each passing day. Nyora, too, noticed her father's struggle. One afternoon, she found him sitting under the old mango tree, staring into the distance. She sat beside him, her small hand slipping into his. Boba, she said softly, whatever it is, we'll face it together. You don't have to be afraid. Okaro felt tears stain his eyes, but he held them back. He couldn't tell Nyora the truth. He couldn't tell anyone. This was his burden to bear, and he would protect his family, no matter the cost. On the 6th night, as the deadline loomed, Okaro sat by the fire, wrestling with his conscience. Moloko's words haunted him, the gods will take what they are owed by force. He looked at Nyora, who was asleep in the corner of the room, her face peaceful and innocent. Could he really give up his precious daughter to the gods? The thought was unbearable. But what if the gods' wrath brought even greater suffering? What if refusing them meant losing not just Nyora but his entire family? Okaro buried his face in his hands, his mind a storm of guilt, fear, and desperation. As the final night approached, Okaro made a decision. He would keep the secret from Amora and his children. If he was to pay the price, he would face it alone. Can I protect them if I refuse? He whispered into the darkness, knowing there was no answer that would ease his torment. A father's guilt. The nights were no longer peaceful for Okaro. Sleep came in short, fitful bursts, only to be interrupted by vivid nightmares. In every dream, he saw Nyora standing in the forest, her bright eyes filled with trust and love. But before he could reach her, the shadows would rise, pulling her away as she called out, Boba, don't let them take me. Okaro would wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. He couldn't escape the crushing guilt that gnawed at his soul. The thought of giving up his daughter, the light of his life, was unbearable. Yet, the fear of the gods' wrath loomed over him like a storm cloud. At home, the weight of his decision began to show. Amora noticed how her husband avoided looking at Nyora, how he barely ate and grew more withdrawn with each passing day. Okaro, Amora said one morning as she prepared breakfast. You've been distant for days. What's wrong? Nothing, Okaro replied quickly, his voice hollow. I'm just tired from all the work. Amora frowned, her concern deepening. Work? You don't need to work anymore. We have enough now. But you're acting like the weight of the world is still on your shoulders. Okaro forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry about me, Amora. Everything is fine. But Amora wasn't convinced. She saw the way he looked at Nyora when he thought no one was watching, like a man carrying a terrible burden. Meanwhile, the village was abuzz with celebrations of Okaro's newfound wealth. His name was spoken with awe and envy, and he was invited to every gathering and feast. Okaro turned cold one evening at the village square. You've truly become a man of fortune. You should share your secret with us. Surely the gods smile on you. The crowd laughed and cheered, raising their cups to toast Okaro. But as the villagers celebrated, Okaro sat quietly, his heart heavy. Their admiration meant nothing to him now. All he could think about was the price he had to pay. On the sixth night, as the full moon rose over Adoba, Okaro sat by the fire in his home, staring into the flames. His family had gone to bed, unaware of the storm raging within him. The room grew cold, and the fire flickered weakly. Okaro didn't look up, he knew who it was. "Malaku," he said, his voice weary. The old man stepped out of the shadows, his glowing eyes fixed on Okaro. "It is time." Okaro didn't move. I can't do it," he whispered. "You can," Malaku replied, his tone sharp and unforgiving. "And you must. The gods have been patient, but their patience is not infinite. If you do not act, they will collect what they are owed by force. And believe me, their wrath will consume not just Nora but your entire family." Okaro's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his chair. "I give up the wealth. Take it all back. Just leave my family alone." Malaku laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "The wealth is no longer yours to give, Okaro. You made your choice the moment you accepted their gift. Now you must fulfill your end of the bargain. The gods demand their offering." Okaro's voice broke as he pleaded, "There has to be another way." "There is no other way," Malaku said, his voice final. "The gods will have what they are owed, with or without your consent. You have until sunrise." With that, Malaku vanished, leaving Okaro alone in the silence of his home. As the hours dragged on, Okaro sat by the fire, his mind a whirlwind of guilt and fear. He thought of Amara's smile, of Emeka and Kobe's laughter, and of Nyora's bright eyes that held so much trust in him. How could he betray them? How could he offer up his precious daughter to the gods? But the alternative, the thought of losing everything, of bringing suffering upon his entire family, was equally unbearable. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Okaro made his decision. On the seventh night, the forest was dark and quiet, the trees casting long, shadowy figures under the pale moonlight. Okaro walked slowly, his heart breaking with every step. Nyora walked beside him, her small hand clutching his. "Boba," she said softly, "where are we going?" Okaro's throat tightened, and he struggled to find his voice. "We're going to the forest, my child. There's something I need to do." Nyora didn't question him further. She trusted her father completely, and that trust tore at Okaro's soul. As they approached the clearing, the symbols on the ground glowed faintly, and the air grew heavy. Okaro stopped, unable to take another step. He knelt beside Nyora, tears streaming down his face. "Nyora," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I love you more than anything in this world. You must always remember that." Nyora tilted her head, confused by the tears in her father's eyes. "I love you too, Boba," she said, her voice filled with innocence. Okaro closed his eyes, his heart shattering into pieces. He knew what had to be done, but he didn't know if he could live with himself afterward. Hook, as Okaro stood in the glowing clearing, clutching Nyora's hand, he heard the faint rustle of leaves behind him. He turned, his heart racing, to see a figure stepping out of the shadows. Was it Malaku, or something worse, the intervention? The clearing in the forest was silent except for the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. Okaro knelt before the ancient altar, his trembling hands clutching the small vial of dark oil that Malaku had given him. Nyora sat quietly beside him, her trusting eyes fixed on her father, unaware of the danger that surrounded them. "Boba, why are we here?" she asked softly, her voice breaking through the oppressive silence. Okaro couldn't meet her gaze. "It's something I must do, Nyora," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "For the family, for all of us." His heart felt like it was being torn apart as he uncorked the vial and poured the oil into his hands. The symbols on the ground began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light across the clearing. Okaro looked down at his daughter, tears streaming down his face. "Forgive me," he murmured, raising his hands to begin the ritual. Suddenly, a voice rang out, piercing through the stillness. "Okaro, stop." Okaro froze, his hands trembling in midair. He turned to see Amora standing at the edge of the clearing, her face a mix of horror and anger. Behind her, a group of villagers emerged, their torches lighting up the night. "Amora!" Okaro's voice cracked with shock and shame. Amora stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing? What madness has consumed you, Okaro?" The villagers muttered among themselves, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as they took in the glowing symbols and the frightened child sitting by the altar. I have no choice," Okaro stammered, his voice breaking. "The gods demand a sacrifice. If I don't, they'll take everything, our wealth, our lives." Amora's eyes filled with tears as she approached him. "And you think giving up our daughter will save us? Have you lost your mind, Okaro? Nyora is our child, not a tool for some ritual." The villagers, emboldened by Amora's words, stepped closer. One of the elders, a gray-haired woman named Ebo, raised her voice. "Okaro, we have known you as a man of honor. This is not the path of an honorable man. Whatever you have done, we can face it together, but you must not harm your own child." As the villagers surrounded the altar, the air grew colder, and the glowing symbols flickered. A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the clearing, and Moloko appeared, stepping out of the shadows with his glowing eyes fixed on the crowd. "You fools," Moloko hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare to interfere with the gods' will. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The villagers recoiled at the sight of the strange man, but Amora stood her ground, shielding Nyora with her body. "We will not let you take her," she shouted, her voice unwavering. Maloko's expression darkened. "The gods demand their offering. If you refuse, their wrath will fall upon all of you. Your precious wealth, your prosperity, it will all vanish like smoke in the wind." Okaro, still kneeling by the altar, looked up at Moloko, his face pale and drawn. "Please, take it all back," he begged. "I don't want it anymore. Just leave my family alone." Moloko sneered. "It's too late for that, Okaro. You accepted their gift, and now you must pay the price. But since you've chosen to defy the gods, they will take everything, your wealth, your crops, your joy, and leave your village in ruin." The ground trembled, and a cold wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the villagers' torches. The glowing symbols faded, plunging the area into darkness. When the light returned, the villagers gasped. The golden ornaments they carried, the fine clothes they wore, all of it had turned to ash. "Our wealth," one of the villagers cried. "It's gone." Despite the devastation, Amora stepped forward, her voice strong and defiant. "You may take our riches, but you will not take our spirit. This village will not be broken by your darkness." The villagers rallied behind her, their fear replaced by anger and determination. Together, they formed a protective circle around Nyora, shielding her from Moloko's gaze. Moloko snarled, his form flickering like a dying flame. "You are fools to stand against the gods. You will suffer for your defiance." Ebo, the elder, raised her staff and stepped forward. "We have lived humbly before, and we will do so again. We will rebuild what you have taken from us. Leave this place, spirit, and never return." The villagers joined her, shouting in unison, "Leave us. Leave our home." Maloko's form began to waver, his voice a mix of rage and frustration. "You think you can defy the gods and survive? Very well. You will regret this day." With one final roar, Moloko vanished, and the clearing fell silent. The villagers gathered around Okaro, who sat slumped by the altar, his face buried in his hands. Amora knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were wrong, Okaro," she said softly, her voice heavy with emotion. "But you are still my husband, and we will face this together. As a family." Okaro looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was so afraid of losing everything that I forgot what truly matters." Amora pulled him into an embrace, and Nyora joined them, wrapping her small arms around her father's neck. The villagers watched in silence, their anger tempered by compassion. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, the villagers returned to find their homes stripped of the wealth they had once celebrated. Yet, instead of despair, they set to work rebuilding their lives. Together, they vowed, "We may have lost our riches, but we still have each other. This village will not be broken." Redemption and forgiveness. The morning after the harrowing events in the forest, the village of Adoba awoke to a strange stillness. The wealth that had once transformed their lives was gone, reduced to ash and dust overnight. Fine clothes had turned to rags, golden trinkets vanished, and the grand meals they once feasted on were but memories. Yet, amidst the quiet despair, there was also a stirring of resilience. The villagers gathered in the square, united by a shared loss and an unspoken determination to rebuild. Okaro stood at the center of the crowd, his head bowed in shame. Amora stood beside him, her hand resting on Nyora's shoulder. The villagers murmured among themselves, their voices a mixture of anger, curiosity, and pity. At last, Ebo, the village elder, raised her staff to quiet the crowd. "Okaro," she said, her voice steady but firm, "you owe us the truth. Tell us everything." Okaro took a deep, shuddering breath. His hands trembled as he stepped forward, his eyes scanning the faces of the people he had known all his life. I made a terrible mistake," he began, his voice cracking. "I was blinded by fear and desperation. Malaku came to me, offering wealth and freedom from our struggles. I thought I was doing it for my family, for all of us, but I was wrong." He recounted everything, the encounter with Malaku, the golden trinket, the promise of riches, and the demand for a priceless offering. He spoke of his sleepless nights, his growing guilt, and the moment he almost sacrificed Nyora. The villagers listened in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from anger to disbelief to sorrow. When Okaro finished, he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I have no excuse for what I did," he said. "I let greed and fear take hold of me, and I almost destroyed everything I love. I deserve whatever punishment you decide." After a long silence, Ebo stepped forward. "Your actions brought great harm to this village, Okaro," she said. "But you also stopped before the worst could happen. Your confession shows remorse, and your family's love for you reminds us of the power of forgiveness." The villagers murmured in agreement, though some still looked unsure. "We will take this matter to the king," Ebo continued. "It is not for us alone to decide your fate." The journey to the king's palace was somber. Okaro walked at the front of the group, his head bowed, while Amora and Nyora followed closely behind. The king, a wise and just ruler, listened carefully as Ebo recounted the events. "Okaro," the king said, his voice deep and commanding, "your actions could have led to great tragedy. Yet, it is clear that you are filled with remorse and have taken responsibility for your choices. For this, I will spare your life." Okaro exhaled in relief, though the weight of his guilt remained heavy. "But," the king continued, "you will dedicate the rest of your days to serving this village. You will rebuild what was lost, not with wealth, but with your hands and your heart. You will prove through your actions that you have learned the true meaning of honor." Okaro bowed deeply. "Thank you, my king. I will not fail." Back in the village, life slowly began to return to normal. The villagers, inspired by Ebo's leadership and Okaro's redemption, worked together to rebuild their homes and farms. Though their wealth was gone, their unity grew stronger with each passing day. Okaro worked tirelessly alongside his neighbors, repairing homes, planting crops, and caring for livestock. He became a source of strength and wisdom, teaching others the value of hard work and humility. One evening, as the sun set over Adoba, Okaro sat with Nyora under the old mango tree. She rested her head on his shoulder, her small hand clasped in his. "Boba," she said softly, "I forgive you." Okaro turned to her, his eyes brimming with tears. "Nyora, after everything I almost did, how can you forgive me?" Nyora smiled, her voice full of the wisdom of a child. "Because you showed me that love can overcome even the darkest choices. You're my father, and I know you'll always protect us." Okaro pulled her into a tight embrace, his heart swelling with both sorrow and gratitude. In the years that followed, Okaro's story became a lesson passed down through generations. Parents told their children of the man who nearly lost everything to greed and fear but found redemption through love, honesty, and service. The villagers of Adoba prospered once more, not through riches, but through unity and hard work. They learned that true wealth lay not in gold, but in the strength of their community and the love they shared. And Okaro, though his heart still carried the scars of his mistakes, found peace in knowing that he had turned his darkest hour into a light for others to follow. Conclusion: the story of Okaro and the villagers of Adoba serves as a timeless reminder: integrity, family, and unity are treasures far greater than anything material wealth can offer.